Morning, everyone. It's been a very busy morning in the Trump trial already. I hope you're all doing okay. I'm ECM, also known as Elizabeth Cronise McLaughlin, and this is Resistance Live for the 18th of April, 2024. We're going to talk about the judge's recent ruling as of this morning about the press and juror coverage. And we're also going to talk about the ongoing developments right now about jurors who have already been sat, because it has been extremely busy so far this morning and jury selection is still underway. So first things first, I am ECM. I'm coming to you as always from occupied unceded Tongva territory, also known as Southern California. Today for our visually challenged viewers, I'm in a white long sleeve top. I have in my thin gold hoops, I think. My hair is down. I'm a pink-skinned, green-eyed, dirty blonde-haired woman, and I am in front of my standing plant, which is growing, my lamp, and my big office chair. Thank you all for being here. Okay. Okay, I understand a lot of you on the Patreon feed who are our paid subscribers and asking questions every morning are very worried about what has happened today. And as always, I am here to talk you off the ledge. This is a very high profile case, and I know there is an awful lot of concern about what is going on with these jurors and what has happened with regard to the GAG order. So we're going to cover both of those in order. Let's just cover really quickly what has happened so far this morning with regard to the jurors that were already sat. So there was a juror already on the jury who had been agreed to by both sides, and well, not agreed to, but they hadn't struck her, and had been seated as juror number 2. This was a woman who was an oncology nurse. She's literally just been interviewed on MSNBC after her dismissal. I just watched the footage a minute before we came on the air. One thing I just want to mention here is that because of the way the press has handled the coverage of this jury selection, the unfortunate fact is that some personal information about some of these jurors got out. And that is not the fault of the judge. And I also want to make this really clear. It is not the fault of Trump's defense team. It is purely the fault of the press. And the reason why I say that is because these jurors have all been asked about their past and current employment as a part of the verbal jury questionnaire that is being read out loud in the courtroom. And the press made decisions to publish the employer information and some identifying information about these jurors. And that has led to some of these jurors being identified and already targeted. And I will just add, it also led to Jesse Waters, the Fox News host, blowing up this particular juror number 2's identity on Fox News last night, or the night before. The result of this was that juror number 2 was getting peppered with text messages and phone calls from friends and family members saying, "Is this you? It sounds like you. How can you think about serving on this jury? Aren't you concerned about the ramifications?" And on and on and on and on. The result of that was that the juror came into the court this morning and told the judge that after all of this, they believed that it would be very hard for her to be fair and impartial. And the judge released the juror from service. Now, I'm going to say a couple of things about this, all right? The judge has dealt with this issue now this morning, and that came in the form of the judge ruling from the bench that the press could no longer report on past or future employment of the jurors and could no longer report on identifying information about any juror that is being interrogated. Okay. So if Jesse Waters does this again, he will be in violation of the court's order of this morning, as would any other member of the jury, of the press, rather. And already, like the New York Times has squelched down their reporting, which had disclosed some of this information. Other reporters have done so as well. And I have to remind everyone that jury tampering is a crime, and that in the event that an investigation is started into any member of the press who has disclosed information about a juror with the intent of interfering with that juror's ability to serve, that person could potentially be prosecuted. All right. Now, I want people to understand a couple of things about this, because I know there's a lot of outrage in the comments. Okay. I have to remind everyone that we have due process in this country, and we have due process in this country for very good reasons. We do not want judges to randomly be able to arrest people, bring them into court, and throw them in jail without any review of their rights. Okay. So for everybody in the comments who's like, Jesse Waters should be in front of the judge already this morning. Well, what Jesse Waters did yesterday was not against an order of the court. Okay. And there's an argument to be made that it could be considered jury tampering, but that requires an indictment before a grand jury, because there has to be a review of whether or not a grand jury thinks that he's actually violated the law. One of the things that's very concerning about the place that we are in right now is there's a lot of people on our side of the fence who want to be able to just like toss these very legitimate democratic norms out the window because it's Trump and it's Fox News and it's the far right. Okay. And I hate to have to be the messenger of this. All right. But if we toss the norms for the sake of someone like Donald Trump and Republicans get back into power like ever again, those norms will be gone for people like you and me. And so we do not want a judge to randomly send someone out to arrest a reporter, no less. Like, let's remember, we have a First Amendment in this country, and immediately throw that person in jail for something they said on the air. There's a process for this. Okay. And the same is true, by the way, with regard to the GAG order. So I got to say something about this because I was really bothered and a little bit upset, not angry, but just like upset by, so many of our Patreon subscribers this morning freaking out about what the judge did with regard to the GAG order. And I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. I just mean that, like, my hope is that by now, and I know we have a lot of new subscribers and followers and Patreon subscribers here, but my hope is that by now, if you've been watching me even for a couple of weeks, let alone for the last 7 years, you understand that there is a process and very good reason for a judge to make a decision to hold a hearing about violations of a GAG order instead of just randomly throwing Donald Trump in jail. And that, by the way, even for those who rightly observe that there are different standards of justice for white men in this country as compared to everybody else, there still has to be a procedural hearing for a violation of a GAG order before you throw somebody in prison for contempt. All right. That's true for everyone. Okay. If a judge does not do that, they will be overturned on appeal. Okay. So let's just talk about the GAG order now for a minute, and then we'll get back to how jury selection is running. All right. So, because there's another issue with another juror that I want to get to. With regard to the GAG order, this morning, the prosecution came into court and said, once again, Your Honor, we want to point out that he's violated the GAG order another 7 times since Tuesday morning, and it has to stop. And the defense said he's allowed to critique Michael Cohen because Michael Cohen is critiquing him. He's allowed to repost whatever anyone says. That's literally not what the GAG order says. The GAG order says you can't say anything about any of the witnesses. Michael Cohen is a witness. And you can't cause anyone to post anything on your feed, nor are you allowed to, like, quote and assume that that gets you around the GAG order. Okay. That's really like Trump trying to be cute. So here's what the judge did in response. The judge said, we have a hearing set for this on Tuesday. We will deal with this argument then. Now, I'm going to say there are very good reasons for the judge doing that, okay? One of them is that there are 300 jurors, potential jurors, sitting in the courthouse right now waiting to be dealt with, all right? And we are in the middle of jury selection, and the judge is running a very tight courtroom to get to a place where the jury is seated. Why? Because the longer it takes to seat this jury, the longer it takes for opening arguments to start and for evidence to be presented and for Trump to be convicted. Not that that's what the judge is after, but he's running a very efficient courtroom. And we already have a hearing set for this. Now, I want to point something else out to everyone else here, all right? It's not like, I mean, I hate to put it in these terms, but I want to be really real world about this, okay? It's not like anything that Trump is going to do between now and next Tuesday is going to do anything different with regard to this jury pool than what he has already done, all right? He can rant and rave and repost Jesse Waters and quote Jesse Waters and run around claiming that the whole jury is full of Democrats and blah, 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 blah. All that is already out there, okay? So let's just say hypothetically he does it again. It's not going to change the makeup of this jury pool, which, by the way, has already been called. All right. All these people had noticed weeks ago that they had to show up at the courthouse this week for jury selection. Okay. So everybody needs to just like take a breath. Okay. There is a hearing coming up on Tuesday. Judge Merchan is not happy with this defense team. In fact, this morning, when the defense counsel said, we want to make an argument that, all of this stuff about Michael Cohen doesn't breach the gag order. The judge was like, I'm interested to see your briefing about that. Okay, this is not a judge who is taking this lightly. And I don't think anybody, I saw a bunch of people this morning on Threads and on our Patreon feed who were like, this should all be over already. And I just have to point out that, like, you really have to, like, please take the long view here, because the other thing that I want to point out is that if, God forbid, and I say God forbid, and I really mean it, Judge Merchan would simply, like, stick Trump in cuffs and throw him in Rikers over the weekend, that would be an indication of bias. It would also be a violation of Donald Trump's due process rights, and he would have an immediate argument for appeal. So you have to look at the totality of the circumstances that we are dealing with in this trial, all right? And I know everybody wants Trump locked up. Believe me, I get that, okay? But also, if the judge does something out of the ordinary course of protecting Donald Trump's due process rights, particularly with this defendant and this set of defense attorneys, the whole trial is in jeopardy. All right? So take a breath. Please take a breath. All right? The gag order is going to be dealt with on Tuesday. There's nothing that Trump can do over the weekend that's going to be any worse than what he's already done. And the other thing I will just say here is that the makeup of this jury pool already reflects that there are people who, like, are concerned about serving, and the judge has already undertaken some very substantial moves to just let people go if they're worried or they're afraid. Okay. This morning, in this new jury pool of 96 potential jurors, something like 48 of them raised their hands and were like, I'm too biased to serve. Fine, go. He's not even asking for, like, individual discussions with these jurors, which is how it would be handled ordinarily. So the people who end up on this jury are going to be people who have assessed the risk and believe that they can be fair and impartial and are there because they are okay with the process to which they have been called. All right. And I want to remind everybody as well, I've said this a lot on this broadcast this week. I said it a lot preceding this week. One of the things that everybody needs to understand is this judge has a huge arsenal of means to keep this jury safe, up to and including sequestration. For those who don't know, sequestration is where the jury is not allowed to go home. They are kept in a hotel that is paid for by the state. The media that they consume is monitored, and they're not allowed to do things sometimes like watch TV or read newspapers or anything else. They're under guard. Okay. There's all sorts of ways that this judge could choose to deal with this jury in the event that the threats against them become more manifest. Okay. And I know there are people on the Patreon feed this morning who are also like, well, what about their families? Well, as of this morning, the press pool cannot report on anything having to do with the identities of these jurors. And if they do it, they're going to be in contempt of the judge's order. Okay. I wouldn't want to be a reporter on this who ends up doing time. Okay. So I think everybody needs to just take a very deep breath. All right. Take a very deep breath about what is happening this morning. And I'm going to say goodbye to this person who's threatening January 6th 2.0. And I want everybody to also understand that there is a real ways to go on this in terms of what Judge Merchan has the ability to do to keep these jurors safe. All right. And one other thing I just want to mention here, in the event that this person's going, please don't argue with trolls in the feed, by the way. Oops, I just banned Tammy by accident. Damn it. Sorry, Tammy, I will get you back. All right. One thing that I just want everybody to just think through here as well is that we're a long way at this point between Jesse Waters doing what he did last night to every juror and there being an actual threat of violence against a member of the jury. All right. So I want everyone to look again, I'll just say it again, at the totality of the circumstances that exist here. Okay. All right. We had a couple of other questions here with regard to jury selection and the gag order and everything else. Oh, one other point on the gag order. This is what I was going to make before I had to block that troll. With regard to the gag order, the other thing I just want people to understand is that if Trump continues to violate the gag order between now and next Tuesday, you can rest assured that there will be additional entries into evidence of the other things that he says. All right. And in the event that he does continue to breach the gag order, which of course he will, because he's a malignant narcissist, he lies continuously and has no impulse control, that will be admitted into evidence on Tuesday. And the more these things pile up, the more likely it is that the contempt citation will be even greater, including up to and including 30 days in jail. All right. So let's just allow people to to continue to follow the law. Okay. And if Trump continues to act the way that he's acting, there will be additional sanctions. All right. And nobody should be thinking that this judge is doing something improper, because far from it. I mean, actually, he's doing everything right. All right. Okay. Cover that. Trump did not stand this morning in the courtroom when the jury pool was admitted into the courtroom. And I just want to make a point of saying this to everyone here, okay? And I said this just very recently on Threads this morning. I tried cases and did motions hearings and everything else in court for 15 years. And one of the things that was true, even though I was a civil litigator and most of my practice was in federal court, one of the things that I did, because of the way courts' calendars were backed up, was I sat through a lot of criminal proceedings. That's because sometimes the criminal calendar would be first thing in the morning and the civil calendar would be next. And I would be sitting in a courtroom waiting for my civil docket to be called. All right. Never in those 15 years did I ever see a situation where a defendant, criminal or civil, did not stand when a jury was brought into the courtroom, let alone a judge. And I have to say that this is one of those things that I said this yesterday, and it's really important to say it again today because of Trump's just flat out disrespect for this jury pool. This sort of stuff does not play well. It does not play well in front of the jury. It does not play well in front of the judge. And it is self-sabotaging. One of the things that you, as a criminal defendant in particular, want to do is try to ingratiate yourself to the jury. One of the things that is ordinarily done by defense attorneys in criminal cases when a defendant is on the witness stand is they encourage the defendant to make eye contact with the jury, to smile at the jury. They try to humanize the defendant so that it makes it harder for the jury to find him guilty. Okay? This sort of behavior by Trump is in defiance of every principle of criminal defense work. And, again, I have to remind everybody that we do not rescue our enemies when they are self-destructing. Okay. So if Trump wants to behave this way in the courtroom, it's only going to inure to his detriment. It's not going to play well. Okay. In addition to that, Trump has apparently been texting people on his phone in the courtroom this morning to the extent that Judge Merchan had to call him out on it and ask him to stop. You're not even supposed to have your cell phone inside this courtroom. So I'm not even sure how that happened. All right. But he's doing all of these things in rebellion and defiance of the judge and the jury. And I'm going to remind everybody that apparently he was very contemptuous of the jury in the second E. Jean Carroll case in this manner as well. I don't have reports that he didn't stand, but he, scowled, didn't pay attention, was sort of looking off and askance. And we all know how that ended, right? With a $200 million plus verdict against him for punitive damages. So I want everyone to understand at this point that while this behavior is somewhat outrageous, again, when your enemy is imploding, don't save them. Okay. It's not going to run well for him. All right. Let's talk about the second juror, because somebody just posted here in the comments that the second SAT juror has been dismissed. There was an issue with juror number 4 that was brought before the court this morning, where the prosecution apparently determined over the last couple of days that juror number 4 had potentially lied on his jury questionnaire. Apparently, this is somebody who had been arrested in the 90s for tearing down political flyers in Westchester County, New York, which is right above New York City, and that they had also lied about having a partner who had some kind of affiliation with the district attorney in Westchester County. So lying on your juror questionnaire is, of course, a really big no-no. And we were waiting on this because juror number 4 was also supposed to be at court at 9:15 this morning and didn't show up until now. Not a good sign for a juror to begin with. That juror has apparently now also been dismissed. Okay. And that is the juror, by the way, who said, "I find Trump mysterious and fascinating." So for those of you who were worried about that juror, he's gone. All right. So that now brings us down from 7 SAT jurors to 5 this morning. Okay. I'm going to remind everybody, another 96 were brought in this morning. 48 were dismissed. Questioning is ongoing. The first 7 were sat from a similar pool. So we could still be done with jury selection by the end of today. All right. I want everyone to be very clear here that, this process, again, as it is being run by Judge Merchan, is a very tightly run and managed process, okay? And I'm also going to remind you all that the prosecution and the defense are now down to 4 peremptory challenges. And we are now in a situation where they've got to seat another 7 jurors and 6 alternates. So one of the things that this means at this stage of jury selection, if you're a litigator, is that you're going to hold those peremptories very close to your vest, because once they're gone, you're stuck with anybody who isn't struck for cause, meaning like someone who has lied or someone who has an obvious bias. So that means that this process, again, once those peremptories are gone, will go very quickly, because as long as a juror isn't struck for cause, they're going to be on the panel, whether as an alternate or as a primary juror. Okay. So this is, again, one of those things where, I do think we're going to be done by the end of today, or at the very minimum tomorrow morning. And I will just say, I think Judge Merchan thinks the same thing, because he moved the Sandoval hearing about the evidence that can be used to impeach Trump on cross-examination up to tomorrow morning. All right. So it's cooking. And I still think we're on target for opening arguments on Monday. Okay. Somebody asked a question about whether or not jurors can take notes. And I'm just going to mention that this really depends on the courtroom, the jurisdiction, and the judge. So in the cases that I tried, jurors were allowed to have a small notebook that was provided to them by the court into which they could take notes. And they left the notebooks in the court overnight. They did not ever take those notes home. And so that, I don't know how the judge is going to handle that here, or if they're going to be permitted to take notes, but it's very common in very complicated cases that jurors are allowed to keep their own notes. However, even if they are not, when they go back to deliberate, they have access to all the evidence. And if there is something that they don't remember, or something that was testified to where there's confusion in the deliberation room about what was said, they can send a note to the judge, and the judge can have that testimony read back to them. All right. So it's not like everyone is required to just remember what's happening here. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, everyone. I'm just going to tell everybody here that I'm having to block trolls more frequently because we have such a larger audience here. And trust me, I will not lose track of my train of thought. Somebody asked a question about that this morning on Patreon. Speaking of which, if you are not yet a Patreon subscriber, you should go over there and do that. You can become a paid subscriber for as little as $2 a month. That's like less than 10 cents a broadcast, more like a nickel. And you can ask me questions in advance of every broadcast. So that's one way of supporting this work. And I'm very grateful for our Patreon subscribers. But somebody asked a question about my troll management. I'm going to get to it in a second. Okay, so we don't know yet whether the jurors are going to be allowed to take notes, but I will say this. The jurors are not required to have incredible memories in order to be able to deliberate at a trial. All the evidence is provided to them. All the documents, all the testimony, they can have testimony read back if they need to. Anything that has been introduced into evidence, they have access to in the jury room. All right. So no worries about that. Okay. All right. Let's see what else. I know a lot of people are disappointed. I was asked to address disappointment. I'm just going to say this. I hope that what I said at the start of this broadcast about keeping the totality of the circumstances of the trial in line has talked a whole bunch of you off the ledge. And I will also just say this, okay? It's very easy in something this high stakes, where a lot of us have already lived through an enormous amount of trauma thanks to this guy over the last 10 years and prior, to want immediate response now that the trial is finally here. Okay. And that is just simply not how trials work. Somebody posted this morning that they were really excited about the trial when it started on Monday, and now they're kind of realizing what a slog it is. And I was like, welcome to the world of trials, right? This is what trials are like. We've got another 6 weeks of this at least. Okay. And the processes and the procedures have to be followed, and there's going to be a need here for everyone when something happens that triggers you, right? Causes an emotional reaction in your body, causes you to panic, to please take a deep breath and manage your response, right? Because if we're all running around in nonstop panic for the next 6 weeks, one, that's not going to be good for getting out the vote. And again, I have to remind you all that action is an antidote to despair, to fear, to panic. If you have that moment of nothing's going to happen, I have to remind you all that the end result of all of this is in the hands of the American people. One very guaranteed way to make sure that he never gets into power again and that he's prosecuted for all this nonsense, is to make sure he loses at the ballot box in November. And that is within all of our control. All right. Like, we have the ability to mobilize to get out the vote where we live. And all of you should be doing it if you're worried about all of this. Okay. One other thing that I just wanted to mention here on this front is that it's critically important to also not be disappointed by things that you do not need to be disappointed by. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here, okay? One of the reasons why it's really critical that you understand what's happening in our judicial system is it will allow you to filter your responses through the lens of, is this really serious or isn't it? All right? And that's just super critical to where we find ourselves. All right. We need to just manage our emotional reactions for a whole host of reasons, not to mention your mental and physical health, but also because this time that we find ourselves in requires all of us to do more to uphold standards of democracy, not less. Okay. So that's my 2 cents on all of that. And I really want everyone to again, when something happens that causes you to have an emotional reaction, please take a deep breath. All right. Mayorkas, I'm so happy about this. I mean, we kind of knew that this was how this was going to go, but the Senate dismissed the impeachment of Secretary Mayorkas yesterday in the space of about 15 minutes. And I will just say that, this whole thing was nothing more than an attempt at a show trial, because the Republicans have nothing to run on, and all they're doing is creating incendiary circumstances of hate with regard to an alleged border crisis. And they impeached him solely so they could, kind of like get back at whomever they think is to blame other than Trump for the fact that he was justifiably impeached twice. So that's gone. And I'm really glad about it. And if you need something positive to hang your hat on, reminder, we have a majority in the Senate. That's the reason why this could happen. You need to be working to make sure that we keep the Senate come November, all right, and take back the House so that we can officially impeach people like Clarence Thomas, who should be long gone. All right. Final thing for today, for all of you. And again, we've got ongoing developments in jury selection. They will be ongoing all day. So if there's a need for me to be back here with an emergency broadcast later on this afternoon, I will do that. Somebody asked a question about how I manage all of this at once. And, look, I'm just going to say one thing to all of you. One of the things that they train you to do in law school, and that trial work in general trains you to do, is to be an incredibly effective and calm multitasker under pressure. All right. So one of the things that means is that, and you guys are not obligated to do this. Like, I just want to say this, if that question on the Patreon feed was coming from a place of like, I want to be able to do this the way that you do it, I don't feel like that's anybody's obligation. But I will say my training as a litigator and as a lawyer did its job, which is that, I needed to be able to stand in court and respond to things in real time, no matter how weird or out of left field they were. It also meant that I became very effective, particularly at oral argument, which is very akin to what I do here, at dealing with interruptions, strange things happening. I have a whole story to tell you all, like at some point, maybe on a coffee hour on Sundays, about, where all my papers landed on the floor in the middle of oral argument and I had to keep going anyway. Like, these are things that you are taught to manage in real time, and preparation is really key. So for those who are worried about how it is that I manage to block trolls in real time while we're sitting here and not lose my train of thought, it's all down to my experience, my training, and 15 years as a trial lawyer. All right. So, I don't want anybody to worry about it. And I have to apologize because one of our regulars got blocked by accident today, but that was more because I clicked on the wrong post. We all make mistakes. All right. That's it for today. Please, if this work is meaningful to you, become a paid subscriber over at Patreon. $2 a month is like nothing. And they go all the way up to 100 if you would care to support me more and help me pay my staff on the back end that do all the technical stuff here. And also, this is taking up a lot of my work day these days, you guys, doing this work for you and covering it and being here twice and sometimes if I need to be, and all of that kind of stuff. So please support this broadcast much in the way that you would NPR or PBS. It's like me and my staff, and we're a small operation, but we deserve to be paid for this work. And if you are not yet a subscriber here to the YouTube channel, please hit subscribe and the bell so you know anytime I go live. If you're a Patreon subscriber, you get an early warning, by the way, on bonus broadcasts. You get a notice of 45 minutes to an hour at least of when I'm going to go live for a second second broadcast. And also, please make sure that you hit the thumbs up on this broadcast. If you're watching on the replay, drop me a comment. I'm happy to chat with you guys when I come back to check the comments throughout the day. And lots of love to our audience, particular mad gratitude to our Patreon subscribers for your ongoing support. And I will catch you back here maybe later on today, but at the absolute latest at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern tomorrow for more of a recap on what's happening today. All right, take care, everyone. Deep breaths. It's going to be okay. And we've got a long way to go. All right, I'll see you all here soon. Thanks so much again for being here. Bye.